Opposite Gloves here. This is the 10th video in the Harmless from the ground up tutorial series, and today we're going to be looking at the LFO section and what it does. So we've already had some experience with this throughout most of the series about what the LFO, that this controls the speed of the oscillation, and we talked a little bit about it, but let's just make things super clear right now. So we have this thing, it's called an LFO. What is an LFO? Well, an LFO is a really big controlling signal. Basically, you have your hearing range from 20 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz on an average person, and anything under 20 hertz is considered an LFO. Granted, 19 is a pretty fast LFO, but because that's 19 times like a second, so it's much faster. But anyways, now let's say this signal, it generates a signal at that rate, and you can set the waveform using this, and you have all these different cool options. And then you also have just your general waveforms. And what this does is it sends that signal to control something else. You don't actually hear this signal. You hear its effect. And so we've been linking the effect using these guys. And I've talked about how the phase, it starts it with it off, and this one starts with it on, as you can see. And this controls our pitch. And we're going to use this to see our waveforms in our big spectrogram here. So if we turn our speed up and we turn our LFO all the way on, we will see a sine wave controlling the pitch. And there's our sine wave, up and down, up and down. If we wanted to maybe choose like stairs, we will see stairs. And you can see the stairs controlling the pitch. And so it's just sending that signal. And we can control how fast that signal oscillates using speed, or much slower. And for something like a laser, you may want a saw wave. So it goes down and poof, it turns back on and down, and you can control how it turns on. So you may want that faster. So you see our saw wave here. And we may want to, now, those are the general waveforms, so you can go through here and mess with those. But global, so right now as we have it, if we hit a note, this LFO signal is being sent to control that signal. But if we hit a second note with global off, it's going to send another signal to control that second note. And as a result, it's not going to line up all that great. But if we have global turned on, and now this will matter on effects where it's a little more important to have it unisoned up, but global will send the same signal, and every time you hit a note, it doesn't matter, it will not restart, it will just continue on its merry way. So with global off, you see that it restarts every single time. With global on, it just continues going up and down, like it does not care where you ended last. So that's a bit of a bummer. I wish that was a separate option, because global, it's important to have global on to keep, because if you hit a second note, they line up with the original LFO, which is pretty neat. But yeah, so I wish they had a second button right here to control that, but they don't. So, but if you're creating a laser sound, let's say you want that to be your laser sound and you want it to control the pitch, you now have one. Pretty cool. So the attack controls how long it takes the LFO to reach its maximum amplitude. So we discussed that it's a waveform, and let's turn it back to a sine wave, and we have our attack on. So you'll see it slowly start to take effect, and then as we hold down the note longer, it'll get bigger and bigger. Let's make our attack longer. And you can see very clearly that principle demonstrated. So that's all that attack does. And you have a whole bunch of special options, so let's go explore those. These get pretty crazy, okay? So there are some really cool options you have with this. So when you select these, you're giving this LFO control basically different instructions. So a filter envelope, it's sort of the same thing as this attack, except for now the filter envelope over here, this guy controls how much this affects your sound. So instead of it just being attack, you now have attack, decay, and amount is controlled over here. And you can see the speed is disabled. So this is another way to make a much more controlled laser. So that is a really neat option. And then you have filter frequency. And what filter frequency does is the frequency now controls the LFO. So you can automate this knob. It becomes sort of a controlling knob for the LFO. That could be useful. If you're using your filter though, it could create some really interesting side effects. So that is what filter frequency does. It just links the control of whatever the LFO is modulating to this knob, essentially. So voice random, basically every time you play a new note, a new signal is sent out that behaves a little differently. So you see our pitch is changing. I'm actually hitting the same note right now. And that's because we have LFO controlling pitch. And so it's randomly selecting values for the pitch. And if we hold down our note, it'll state that value. So if we hit another note, that one gets new values, but the held down note does not. So that is another really interesting option for LFO. That might be more useful for things like width. If we were to link that, turn our phaser on. So that is a really cool option. I like using pitch right now just because it's the most obvious. So that's what voice random does. And then we have velocity. Make sure your phaser's off. I turned it off. And what velocity does is you hit notes softer and louder, you change the velocity. It's not the volume, it's different. Your pitch will change because that's what you have linked to the LFO. So that's one way of linking controls to your keyboard. So that is a really cool option. Then we have pitch, and as you can imagine, this just modulates pitch. And instead of it being a LFO, it is now just a controlling knob. So let's go ahead and make a laser because I have talked about lasers so much. And let's use the pitch option we just talked about to do it. And so, you know what? No, let's use this is not the smartest way to make a laser. Let's use the envelope option to do this. So right now, as it stands, make this 120. That's what we've got. And we want it to be a laser, so we're going to go to envelope, filter envelope. So now this controls it, and that should be all we really need to do. Okay. There we go. Maybe we want it to... Nope, they always go up. That's good to know. Maybe if we switch the envelope. Nope, this is only how you make lasers going up. If you want a laser to go down, you're going to need to use the pitch setting and automate it, which isn't all that bad because you just do this once and you just clone it a bunch of times. So first, make sure it's on the default value so you don't have to do that. Create automation clip, zoom in, and just go like this. Boom. And then just clone that a bunch of times. And so most people have their lasers go faster. Let's do that. Why not, you know? Control Z. Move this in. Clone it. Make this one unique. Check it out. And that would be a great dubstep filler drop. And you could do, of course, a whole bunch of post-processing and things, but this is the general sound, the idea behind how to do that. But the LFO can be used to do much more subtle things, like we could change the speed and make it a multi-sine. A multi-sine wave looks something like, let me open up an FM8. An FM8. And go to operators. And this is what a multi-sine looks like. You have more than one sine wave running through your signal at the same time. And it begins to come more and more like a saw wave, but it's not quite a saw wave. So that's a multi-sine wave. So we're going to set it to multi-sine. We're going to link it to our filter width and our filter offset just because we can. And we're going to get rid of this. We're going to turn our filter on. And maybe make a different pattern now. And you can see our wave happening. And you could just go on like that and maybe add some filter effects, some unison, and wide bump resonance because we can, and maybe offset it just a little bit. Sub bass. This would not be a good idea if you're playing a chord and there's a low note. You know, just all these options. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and have a blessed day.